Punk.
Yeah, CM Punk. So CM Punk did an Instagram post, I believe, and said something to the effect of he's reading Steve Kern's book, which, in fact, I'm reading Steve Kern's book, too. It's an interesting book. And he brought up that when Steve Kern was in Memphis, he got into a fight with Coco Beware. I think that, I don't know if you know he was called Coco Beware then. Well, he wasn't called Coco Beware. He may have been called Coco Ware. He may have been called Sweet Brown Sugar at the time. But, and he said that, like, Lawler sat them both down, and that was it. So it appeared that he was trying to say that in wrestling in the past, yeah, there's fights, but you just...
Because every situation is exactly the same.
Well, and that situation was completely different. I forgot. I actually read it, but I don't remember exactly what the situation was. But it was, what I do remember about the Steve Kern Coco Ware fight is that it was one of those fights where I think Steve Kern, like, threw one punch and Coco Ware may have, like, blocked it or something, and then they were pulled apart. It was like over in, 15, 20 seconds, something like that, maybe 30 seconds. It was not, but again, every situation is not identical. But, but what it says is that he wants back in, which we've already known. And other people have said that too, that he's looking to get back in, and it's up to Tony, and, whatever, it's up to Tony, and Tony's going to make a decision at some point. Right now, he's probably just about ready, if not ready already, from the torn triceps. So it is one of those things that he can do soon enough, and then it's a tough decision. So, I'm always asked, like, what would you do? So this is what I would do if the company is in a situation where it is on the verge of folding, and you need something that hopefully can turn it around, and there's nothing that guarantees that upon coming back will turn it around. But if you're on the verge of folding, and they're not, by the way, I'm not saying that, but if you are, 100%, you have to take the chance and try to bring them back, if it means the difference between life and death of the company. If it means the difference between being canceled by your television partner because ratings are low, and you need someone to pick up the ratings, and he has picked up the ratings in the past. There's no guarantee he will coming back. And I'm sure if he had read the Steve Kern book, one of the things he would know is the Fabulous Ones, when they were in Memphis, they had a big falling out. Well, Steve Kern had a big falling out with Jerry Lawler. This is when the Fabulous Ones were, drawing big, and Memphis territory was really strong, and they had a falling out, and they... Essentially, what happened was one night in Louisville, Kern was just fed up, and he said that he told Stan Lane, it's like, we're gone, we're done, I'm sick of Lawler. He had problem after problem with Lawler. He thought that Lawler was trying to hold him back, get him in trouble, because the Fabulous Ones were more over than Lawler, and Lawler was just trying to, whatever, get him in trouble and things like that. So he just said he was fed up. So they were in Louisville, and Kern decided that him and Lane would quit, but also they would go out that night, go in front of the crowd, walk out in front of the crowd. There was this old strategy that a lot of wrestlers would do. The Bruiser did it. It was kind of a famous thing when you have a falling out with a promoter. You go in front of the crowd, and you then leave the building. So when the promoter announces that so-and-so didn't come, so-and-so missed his flight, you can't do that because everybody saw that you were there. And then when you don't wrestle, the promoter takes all the heat. So it's kind of a way to screw the promoter on the way out. And the promoter there was Christine Jarrett, and obviously Steve Kern was looking to do that. And so he left, and they went to the AWA. And so Lawler... went on TV, and this is another one of those lessons, figuring they'll never come back. And he went on TV the next Saturday morning and just buried them, saying, like, these guys, they wanted to go to big cities, and they thought, our cities weren't good enough for them anymore, and they were too big of stars for us, and just basically buried them. You know, like Vince did with Austin, took his ball and went home. K1 did with Bob Sapp famously. And in almost all these cases, when you do this, I always say, this is so stupid because historically, you know they're coming back. I remember having that discussion with people in WWE with Austin after Vince did that took his ball and went home thing. And it's like, why are you doing this? And it's like, well, he's never coming back. And we needed to show, and they even had Dwayne go out there and do it, which was ridiculous. And go, you know he's coming back. He's never coming back. He's never coming back. It's like, he's coming back. He's going to come back. It might be a year, might be 2 years. He's going to come back. You're going to make up, you know. And, of course, he did. And when he did, in the case of Austin, he never drew close to what he did before. In the case of the Fabs, when they came back, they didn't draw close to what they did before. So it didn't last long. Well, anyway, like I said, if keeping your TV is if it's you're on the verge of losing your TV, and you need something, a Hail Mary, absolutely, you call him. If not, what's a good reason for him to come back? I mean, if he comes back and says, goes in the locker room and apologizes to everyone for what he did, and is conciliatory and said, it's my mistake and all this, and the locker room accepts it, then yeah, sure, you could come back. If your company's not in jeopardy, your TV's not in jeopardy, and he doesn't apologize, can you give me a good reason why he should be back?
Well, there's also the idea that he could apologize and the locker room might not accept his apology. And you've got an issue there as well.
Well, then it depends on if they don't accept his apology. It depends on what, again, how many in the locker room. If it's a couple people who don't accept the apology, if it's 80% who don't accept the apology, those are two different things. If it's 3 people or 6 people out of 100, then, you probably can bring them back. Maybe not. If it's 75 out of 100, there's no good reason to bring them back unless it's to save the company or to save the television time slot. If it's that many people who don't want him back under any circumstance. So, yeah, I think it's ultimately they're not going out of business. I don't think that they're going to lose their TV, and I don't think that he'll be the difference between losing their TV or not losing their TV. So, in the end, yeah, I guess it would be up to the locker room. So one of the things why this is so different from the past, because in the past, these situations, more often than not, if it's a star of the caliber of Punk, if it's a nobody, maybe never come back, right? Or maybe years later come back. I mean, people have come back from wars. Bearcat Wright went back to L.A. after the deal with Blassie, and they were, where he shot on Fred Blassie, who was the number 1 guy in the territory, and wouldn't drop the title to him, and they had to send Gene LaBelle out after him and everything like that, and he came back. And there's, countless situations of that, but the difference is back in those days, wrestling was a business about drawing at the house shows, and the paychecks of the wrestlers also revolve around drawing at the house shows. So a guy like, who's someone who obviously I knew very well, Bruiser Brody. Bruiser Brody often, I was thinking back, like, did Bruiser Brody really get into a lot of dressing room fights? And he did with, he had a famous fight with Dick the Bruiser. And I'm sure he had others. I remember when he threw Paul Heyman on the ground, once, but he didn't really try to hurt Paul Heyman. I think he was just trying to teach Paul Heyman a lesson, because Paul Heyman was, I don't even remember the whole situation. I think Paul Heyman was talking to someone that fans could see that they were feuding or something like that, and Brody was just trying to shake him up and go, don't let the fans see you do this type of thing. But, as far as, there were times where he often worked out on promotions and often came back. And one of the keys is because he could draw, and they were week-to-week territories, or in the sense that, like if business was down, they're looking for a shot in the arm, and he could give him a shot in the arm. The other part of that was key is that for the talent was getting paid based on the house.
Exactly.
So for the talent, like this is when you're talking about for the talent. If the talent was being paid based on television ratings, let's just say that you're or the house. Let's just say you're being paid based on the house. If this guy in your mind maybe can draw you a couple of more fans, even if you don't want him back, like with Brody, where it's like, oh, he's an asshole, but he can come in and he can draw, and we all make more money, and that's the goal. That was the goal of the game then, and still to a degree is certainly part of the goal of the game today. That we can make more money, so therefore he's valuable to the company, even though we don't like him, and he may walk out on us again, and probably will, and and all that. But until he walks out, we're all going to make more money because he's going to draw, significantly more than we've been drawing. There's no guarantee that Punk will do that, but the point is there is not one person on that roster who makes more money if they draw, and again, with Punk, it's not like with Brody where you might be the difference between 700 people and 2,000 people or something like that. This isn't that. It isn't someone who's going to triple business or something like that. But he might help business a little bit. But the point is that in that locker room, will they make more money if Punk comes back? And the answer is, probably not. Possibly you can look at it where if the company skyrockets, then, there'll be so much more revenue. But logically, I don't see him making it skyrocket. He might help it a little bit. And then, but again, that would be up to, again, what the talent thinks. So you don't want, do you want to bring a guy in that 75% or 80% of the people don't want, only to save the company or to save the TV time slot? If it's 10%, that's a different story. And I don't know what it is, but a lot of people, it's again, what benefit if he's not there to save a dying company or save a dying television show, there's no inherent reason that he should come back like a Bruiser Brody, because with Bruiser Brody it was a completely different thing. Bruiser Brody would greatly increase business when he would come back to these places, and everybody would make more money because he came back. And these were small companies that were struggling, and that's what he preyed on. His thing was always, you work for the small companies because they need you more. The big companies don't need you as much. That's why he wasn't going to go to WWF until the last run of his career, because he could always go back to these, these other companies would pay him not necessarily more, but he would have a lot more power there, and he'd have a lot more, and he was still a free agent, and he could do what he wanted, and he could be in control of his own destiny, so to speak. So I always kind of thought like Brody was kind of like an interesting character when it comes to thinking about like CM Punk. But like, again, every situation's different, and this situation, it's a decision Tony's going to have to make. But people who are just like, you want him back, well, it's got to fit into the program, unless he's this megastar who is going to make a giant difference, and I don't think he's that. He was when he first came in. I don't think he's that. But if he, if he comes in with this attitude of like, man, I'm sorry I put everyone through this, I'm going to try to make it better, and they accept that, then I guess that's probably the best scenario. I don't know if he's willing to be that person, and time will only tell if he is or he isn't.
Jamie Hayter,